I love slasher movies. The killers, the survivors, the set pieces, the almost cozy familiarity of the subgenre that can knock you out with a perfect twist. But for every iconic culture-shaping character, there's a dozen lesser-known movies that never broke through to the mainstream. It's easy for great entries to go overlooked, especially when they're not part of the most recognizable franchises. Last year, I did videos highlighting 13 unsung slashers and 13 unsung monster movies. Now, we're going back to the slasher subgenre, going deeper and weirder, ranging from the flawed but fun to the hidden gems. This video is like the Super Mario Bros. 2 of slasher videos. Not the Super Mario Bros. That just reskinned Doki Doki Panic. I'm talking the true Super Mario Bros. 2 that picked up right where the original left off and went hard. Maybe you've seen all these movies. That just means it's time for a rewatch. Maybe you're less acquainted with the genre and don't know much beyond the classics. In any case, I'm gonna highlight another 13 unsung slasher movies that any fan of the genre should watch. Remember, these films aren't ranked. We're going chronologically by release date for this trip through the lesser-seen side of horror history. From the more gentle side of crazed killers to the dang-ass freak masterpieces. These are even more slashers that don't get enough love. Number 1. Happy Birthday to Me from 1981. Written by Timothy Bond, Peter Jobin, John Saxton, and John Beard, and directed by J. Lee Thompson. The most popular kids at Crawford Academy are dropping one by one, and it all seems tied to cool girl Ginny and a mystery trauma from her past. One of my favorite aspects of the classic slasher is how quickly it can shift from chill hangout film to brutal gore fest and back again at a moment's notice. Happy Birthday to Me executes that switch over and over to the point of creating a delirious and purposefully confusing atmosphere. But best of all is the slow reveal of both past mystery and present danger, wrapping them up with high concepts that force you to go along for the wild ride. Ginny's experimental brain surgery is warping how she understands and remembers the world around her, making her into an unreliable protagonist, complete with an unreliable camera. Happy Birthday throws more and more reveals and twists at the viewer as it goes along, not only shifting its approach to horror, but making its audience doubt what they're seeing with their own eyes. To say anything about its climax is to ruin the fun of the film. But all I'll say is that there's more twists and turns packed into 10 minutes than you could ever want in a mystery-focused slasher. This VHS cover used to freak me out as a kid visiting Blockbuster. Now, I love what lies beyond it. Number 2. Dark Night of the Scarecrow, also from 1981. Written by J.D. Feigelson and directed by Frank DeFelitta. Originally airing on CBS, Dark Night of the Scarecrow is almost a slasher without a slasher, as its primetime TV showcase meant that this possibly supernatural tale of revenge couldn't feature any of the blood and guts that defined the then-current slasher boom in theaters. Instead, Feigelson's screenplay and DeFelitta's direction rely on moodiness and suspense, in a story about a wrongfully murdered, mentally handicapped man named Bubba, the toll on his young innocent friend Mary Lee, and the vengeance wreaked on the men who killed him in the Deep South. Is our dead man back from the grave? Is one of his loved ones seeking justice where the courts fell short? Or is the guilty conscience of his killers finally catching up to them? Scarecrow is a very simple story and its execution is without frills, but I really enjoy its unconventional approach to a slasher, devoting almost its entire first act to the inciting incident before becoming a slow burn. All the body count set pieces are still here, but nothing really conforms to the stabby trope of the typical slasher. If you're looking for something low-key, spooky, and with an authentic rural mood, this one's for you. Number 3. Pieces from 1982. Written by Rick Randall and Roberto Loyola, and directed by Juan Piquer Simon. Much has been made of the psychosexual underpinnings of the slasher genre, especially the earliest entries. Phallic weapons, disturbed killers, final girls whose own sexuality either saves or condemns them. Well, Pieces is a film that takes those transgressive undercurrents, says forget subtlety, and puts them right up front from the very beginning. Taking place on a college campus, Pieces sees a mysterious chainsaw-wielding killer target women for a series of brutal attacks, with our lead college student Kendall and a small group of police trying to crack the mystery. As a Spanish-Italian-American co-production, Pieces is part giallo with its black-gloved mystery assailant, and all slasher. With a load of grisly kills and insanely bloody aftermath, that, unsurprisingly, got it the Video Nasty label in the UK. That blend of nations behind the camera also creates an intensely strange tone. A movie posing as an all-American college scandal, while using that telltale Spanish to English dubbing, results in some fantastically strange translations and line readings. But best of all is this film's willingness to just go with anything it can think of, ranging from brutal set pieces to a late-night kung fu attack, to the most out-of-left-field, intensely strange ending you could never predict. The result is a truly fucked-up experience made hilarious by its execution. Number 4, The House on Sorority Row from 1983. Written by Mark Roseman and Bobby Fine, and directed by Mark Roseman. The basic elements of House on Sorority Row are pretty typical for the subgenre, with the film focused on a group of recently graduated sorority girls targeted by a killer at their home, during a party and late into an isolated night. With plot points like a prank gone wrong, a doctor with a dark secret about his patients, and a final girl whose morality compared to the rest of her friends easily marks her as the protagonist. However, it's the quality that all of these elements are done with, while still executed in a B-movie package, that makes the film stand out so much. Roseman is clearly using the pacing and tension of Alfred Hitchcock in his directing, while being inspired by the similar pool-themed murder cover-up of Les Diaboliques. Meanwhile, cinematographer Tim Surstedt provides a lot of unconventional blocking and framing, especially during the film's kills, while Richard Band and the London Philharmonic Orchestra create an intense classical score throughout. All of these pieces elevate what would otherwise be a very standard girls in a house body count picture, leading to a drug-laced, hallucinatory climax. An absolute early slasher gem. Number 5. Psycho 2, also from 1983, written by Tom Holland and directed by Richard Franklin. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is one of the foundational texts of the slasher, but it doesn't exactly fit the subgenre's mold. Decades later, and Universal used their iconic film to jumpstart a franchise of their own during the slasher heyday. Psycho 2 brings back Anthony Perkins as Norman, now reformed from his time in a mental institution, and looking to restart his life free from mother's influence. But when murders start happening, the question becomes if Norman has returned to his old ways, or if someone is trying to make him crack. Psycho 2 isn't the groundbreaking classic that the original is, and falls much more in line with the slashers being made at the time. The difference is in Anthony Perkins' lead performance as a man with a dark past, and the threat of his insanity looming around every corner. It's got great suspense that it sustains much longer than you'd expect, and there's so many twists that you'll never be able to guess them all. So while the film satisfies in ways that slasher fans want, with kills that range from the brutally tragic to the strangely gross, Perkins' Norman Bates and his struggle to stay sane is the best part, culminating in a dark and thematically juicy ending that's made even better by 2 films worth of investment into our alternating antagonist and protagonist. Number 6. Neon Maniacs from 1986, written by Mark Patrick Carducci and directed by Joseph Mangine. When a group of killer monsters, complete with their own set of playing cards, are unleashed from their home under San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge, yeah, you heard me, our survivor girl Natalie must prepare for another attack by the Neon Maniacs. This is an extremely 80s movie, full of high school drama, synthwave, and nonsensical plot contrivances. Its score is a ballad-esque keyboard that's almost Mario is Missing core. I wouldn't call Neon Maniacs a good movie, actually I'd call it a mess, but it's such an odd and unpredictable mash of ideas that it's kinda undeniable. What makes Neon Maniacs totally unique is that it doesn't have one slasher, it has a whole cadre of monster killers, each with their own unique gimmick that feels like WWE's Golden Age mashed up with Nightmare on Elm Street. No real explanation given, just a group of villains that include everything from a leather daddy to a beast man to a friggin' lizard. Be warned, there's like just a massive amount of high school drama between the set pieces, but Neon Maniacs' weirdo horror charms are totally wicked. Number 7. Blood Rage from 1987, written by Bruce Rubin and directed by John Grissmer. A strange, stilted, but often gnarly little movie, Blood Rage starts with young twins Terry and Todd at a drive-in, with Terry soon killing a moviegoer and blaming it on his brother. Cut to a decade later and the traumatized Todd escapes from the asylum, just as Terry, whose murders seem propelled by his mother's interest in other men, starts a new killing spree in their apartment complex. The result is a movie filled with stiff performances, a director who seems to be learning on the job, and apparently temporarily quit during filming, and a performance by Louise Lasser as the twins' mother, Maddie, that is so purposefully over the top and messy that it makes up for the simultaneously corny and lifeless work by Mark Soper as our lead twins. It's the sort of watch it and be amazed movie where every decision is so strange that you really can't predict what happens next. There's a sense of suburban banality to it all thanks to filming within a real-life Florida apartment complex, complete with bad relationships, alcoholism, and lots of Thanksgiving family secrets that adds to the central twin dynamic of betrayal and murder. By putting its twist up front, Blood Rage gets down to business fast, until careening into its wild, dark ending reveal. This one's for the dang-ass freaks. Number 8. Amsterdamned from 1988. Written and directed by Dick Moss. The classic slasher has major roots in the Italian giallo subgenre, sharing its focus on mysterious killers, investigations, and high body counts with extravagant deaths. Amsterdamned is about 50% slasher, 40% giallo, 10% Jaws, and 100% police procedural, placing its aquatic killer in the middle of the canal-crisscrossed Amsterdam. As a Dutch production actually filmed in Amsterdam, this aquatic killer story has an authentic European flair that counterbalances its killer moments. Slight spoilers, but the secret is that our killer is a scuba diver, hiding within the city's canals, and Moss makes sure to take full advantage of the unique scenarios that setup can yield, including an underwater scuba-on-scuba attack. As it goes on, Amsterdam becomes more and more of a procedural, hooking on to the then rise of cop dramas, with stakeouts, crime scene monologues, and a pretty cool speedboat chase that feels more Bond than horror, alternating with the slasher set pieces. That means that Amsterdam ends in a way that doesn't fully satisfy slasher expectations, but if you think of this as equally a police procedural with slasher sauce on top, you'll be more than satisfied. Number 9. Phantom of the Mall: Eric's Revenge from 1989, written by Scott J. Schneid, Tony Michelman, and Robert King, and directed by Richard Friedman. This one's for the people that want less blood and guts and more than enough cheese to make the world's biggest pizza. A loose retelling of Phantom of the Opera, obviously, Phantom of the Mall centers on a mysterious killer hiding in a newly opened shopping mall. But it's pretty clear early on that the figure is Eric, the seemingly dead boyfriend of our main character, Melody, who seeks revenge on the people who burned his home down and disfigured him. Now, Eric poses a bigger threat to the mall than the coming of online shopping. Phantom is part mystery, part slasher, and all 80s nostalgia, thanks to its setting. For fans of malls and movies, that's me, Phantom of the Mall was shot at the Sherman Oaks Galleria, which also hosted Chopping Mall, Terminator 2, and more. This one dips in and out of being a slasher as our killer is both the hero and villain of the story, first saving Melody from the corrupt characters within the mall, and then pursuing her for himself in classic Phantom fashion. It's a collection of late 80s styles, vibes, and places, much more of a chill hangout time than most other slashers. Plus, Pauly Shore before he really went all Pauly Shore is here. Number 10. Popcorn from 1991, written by Todd Hackett and directed by Mark Harrier. Not the last slasher in a theater listed here, Popcorn sees a group of film students hold an all-night horror marathon. But a killer with a connection to a past tragedy targets the sold-out showing. With tons of red herrings and a tone that shifts wildly all over the place, Popcorn is unpredictable in where it will go next or what the next set piece will be. But with a series of films within the film paying tribute to the gimmick-filled career of William Castle and other filmmakers of the time, Popcorn is just as much a tribute to the B-movies of the past, as it is a skewering of its most rabid fans. Best of all, it's campy and funny on purpose, willing to send up its most ludicrous moments for some extra fun. What I like the most about Popcorn is that it's constantly shifting its style and structure, moving from a mystery to a body count picture to a protracted showdown with our killer. That ends up giving us much more detailed insight into the villain, showcasing him to be a tormented and flawed victim turned murderer, instead of the more common silent mystery man featured in most slashers. For something that clearly loves horror movies but is still offbeat, Popcorn hits the spot. Number 11. Cherry Falls from 1999, written by Ken Selden and directed by Jeffrey Wright. When a killer starts targeting virgins in the town of Cherry Falls, hundreds of would-be victims decide to have sex or die trying. The least discussed of the post-Scream slasher boom entries, Cherry Falls is definitely of its era, with a heavy emphasis on high school relationship drama, but it doesn't lean into the meta self-awareness of the time, and is a lot more brutal than most of its contemporaries. It's also got a much darker streak to it that comes more and more into focus as the film plays, taking a very silly and fun premise and emphasizing its more disturbing aspects. Specifically, the relationship between Brittany Murphy as our lead Jody and Michael Biehn as her sheriff father is slowly picked apart, alongside a town and its teenagers losing their minds. The late 90s to early 2000s slasher boom was a pretty brief moment in time, but it's an unmistakable mini-era that offers its own tropes, aesthetics, and archetypes that are their own flavor of nostalgia. Cherry Falls satisfies that craving with a slightly different feeling than its more famous contemporaries. Number 12. Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon from 2006. Written by Scott Glosserman and David J. Steve, and directed by Scott Glosserman. A mockumentary approach to the slasher, Behind the Mask is told from the perspective of a documentary crew interviewing and following the everyday life of a new slasher icon in the making, with Scott Glosserman's film walking a fine line between deconstructing the genre and creating a new pillar of it during a time when the slasher was passé. Specifically, Behind the Mask demystifies the slasher, with Vernon detailing his meticulous pre-planning and tricks, while icons like Jason, Freddy, and Michael are made part of the same grounded world. As the film goes on, lead filmmaker Taylor slowly pulls apart the expectations of both viewer and killer, dispelling his myths while he grows much more dangerous. In particular, Nathan Basil as Leslie Vernon alternates between being charmingly down-to-earth and creepily focused, strengthening the film's balance between fear and understanding. The big switch the film executes in its final act is just okay, as it's operating as basically a normal slasher that doesn't do anything new, but Behind the Mask's first two documentary-driven acts are really great. And number 13, The Last Matinee from 2020. Written by Manuel Facal and Maximiliano Contenti, and directed by Maximiliano Contenti. An Argentinian Spanish-language slow burn, The Last Matinee is a throwback to not just old movie theaters, but to both giallos and slashers, with almost the entire film taking place in a decrepit movie theater in Montevideo, as our protagonist Anna takes over as projectionist on the night a killer locks himself and his prey inside. The look and methods of its black-gloved killer evoke Bava and Argento, while its no-frills story are very much in the vein of any classic slasher movie. There's no real story, and even the killer remains a total mystery. But you know this guy's a sick fuck cause he's got a whole jar of pickled eggs in his car. Oh, and he kills a bunch of people and likes to cut their eyes out to eat later. But the pickled eggs? Golly. It's absolutely a slow burn, emphasizing mood, color, music, and atmosphere above all. The Last Matinee looks amazing thanks to cinematographer Benjamin Silva, with a really rich and deep color palette, a way of framing its shots that are both beautiful to look at and suspenseful, and some kills that are grimy and gross in a way that will make you squirm. It's a dark, brutal little movie that rarely pulls its punches, but it looks so good, you won't be able to turn away. And with that, we reach the end of our second journey through the unsung side of slashers. And I hope this inspired you to dive even deeper into this killer horror subgenre and discover all its often unappreciated, gory glory. Thanks for watching today's video. And after I had so much fun making my first 13 unsung slasher videos from last year, I knew there was gonna be a time when I came around to it again. And as I mentioned, last year I also did a 13 Unsung Monsters video, and I want to do a lot more of these videos on different types of subgenres, including supernatural, ghosts, found footage, and more. But I just had to get back to the slashers. If you've been watching my channel for really any length of time, you know that I love the subgenre, and getting to dig deeper into this weird and less talked about side is so much fun. And it gives me a chance to talk about movies that I probably would never do a video on, although I probably am going to do a video on Psycho 2 and the other Psycho sequels someday. This video really gave me a chance to go even deeper into the niche and weird side of slashers. Think of it as Unsung Slashers 201 instead of last year's 101. And if you haven't seen last year's video or the Monsters video, go check them out, because I think they're really fun and they highlight a lot of movies that a lot of people haven't seen, and that I think are all really worth your time if you're fans of the subgenres. I'd love to know your thoughts on these 13 unsung slashers, which ones you've seen, which ones are your favorites, and which ones you really want to check out after watching this video. Also, let me know what other type of horror subgenre you'd love for me to cover next. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons for their continued support, and if you'd like to be a patron, it's only $1 a month for early access to every video, and exclusive Patreon-only reviews, with our continued journey through Hayao Miyazaki's filmography in Miyazaki Madness. So until next time, I hope that you're taking care of yourselves, and enjoying a less talked about slasher.